In a world where everyone wants to be seen, where every thought becomes a post, where every success is broadcast for likes, there lies a dangerous illusion. We've been told that visibility equals power, that the more you show, the more you share, the more you speak, the more influence you gain. But what if that's not true? What if being seen isn't power? What if it's the fastest way to lose it? Niccolo Machiavelli, a man who studied rulers, betrayals, and kingdoms, warned us long ago. Avoid being hated or envied. Both lead to your downfall. And how do you trigger hatred? How do you invite envy? By showing off, by being loud, by needing to be seen. You see, the most dangerous man in the room is not the one who shouts, not the one who brags, not the one posting his highlights. It's the one who says nothing, the one who watches, the one who waits. Let's strip this illusion bare, because the modern world is obsessed with visibility. We're told to build in public, to live out loud, to document everything. Your business, your relationships, your emotions, your struggles, your wins. But what no one tells you is this. Every time you show your hand, you give someone the opportunity to prepare against it. Every time you reveal your strategy, you make yourself predictable. And in the world of power, predictability is weakness. The man who shares everything may be admired, but he's also watched. He's studied, measured, compared, resented. Now ask yourself, do you want to be admired, or do you want to be untouchable? Machiavelli understood something we've forgotten. Everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. That quote isn't about deception. It's about protection. The moment people think they fully understand you, they stop fearing you. They stop respecting you. You become familiar. And what is familiar is disposable. Let's talk straight for a moment. When you post your goals, you invite others to mock them. When you show your progress, you give others a chance to criticize or copy. When you expose your relationships, you open yourself to sabotage. This isn't paranoia, it's strategy. Because power doesn't live in visibility. It lives in mystery. It lives in restraint. It lives in silence. Think of the most influential people in history. Were they loud? Number. They were deliberate, measured, focused. They moved behind the scenes. And by the time you felt their influence, it was already too late. Machiavelli lived in an era where men died for being too loud. Rulers were assassinated not because they were weak, but because they made themselves too visible, too early, to too many. They performed for the crowd, and the crowd turned on them. Sound familiar? We see this every day. The celebrity who overshares and gets cancelled. The entrepreneur who announces his plans only to be undercut by competitors. The influencer who reveals too much and loses the respect they once commanded. In the court of power, exposure is not currency, it's debt, and visibility creates a debt that performance must constantly repay. But silence? Silence gives you space, freedom, flexibility. It lets you move without announcing. It lets you strike without warning. It lets you win without asking for permission. Let's paint a picture. Two warriors walk into an arena. One stands tall, raises his sword, and declares, "I will win this battle." The crowd cheers. He looks strong. He sounds confident. But now, everyone knows his intent. His ego is exposed. He must now perform. The other warrior walks in silently. No grand entrance, no speech. He locks eyes with his opponent and says nothing. He doesn't need to. He knows the power isn't in the words, it's in the presence, in the mystery. Who do you fear more? Who do you trust to win? The loud man, or the one who doesn't need to speak? Machiavelli's world was brutal. But it wasn't so different from ours. The weapons have changed, but the rules of power have not. When you're loud, they track you. When you're quiet, they imagine you. And what people imagine is almost always more powerful than what is real, because visibility has limits. But imagination is endless. Mystique multiplies power. Now here's the mistake most people make. They think being invisible means being weak. They think being silent means being submissive. That's wrong. Silence is not cowardice. Silence is control. The man who can sit in silence, who can resist the urge to explain himself, who can act without applause, that man is terrifying. Because no one knows what he's thinking, no one knows what's coming, and no one can prepare for it. So here's the first lesson you must burn into your mind. Visibility is not power. Control is power. And control starts with what you choose not to reveal. Be the man who says less, who moves smart, who listens more than he speaks. Don't post every win. Don't share every plan. Don't advertise your mindset. Let them feel your power, not hear it. Because by the time they hear it, it's already too late. Next, we'll dive deeper. We'll uncover the lost art of strategic silence and how to use it to build real, lasting influence. No more performance, no more displays, only deliberate moves made with ruthless precision. You've been lied to. They told you that communication is key, that the more you say, the more you're understood, that being transparent builds trust, that openness creates connection. But here's what Machiavelli knew, and what few dare to say out loud. The more you say, the more common you become. The man who always speaks dilutes himself. The man who explains everything gives his enemies a map, and the man who can't shut up is already defeated. In part 1, we exposed the lie of visibility. Now we go deeper into the power of restraint, because there is a kind of strength that comes not from what you say, but from what you choose not to. Let me give you a picture. You're in a negotiation. The other person talks and talks, listing their terms, their desires, their limits. They think they're in control. You say nothing. You listen. Maybe you nod. Maybe you don't. And in their silence, they start to feel uncertain. So they say more, they reveal more, they lower their offer, they get nervous. Why? Because your silence made them feel watched. Because your restraint forced them to fill in the blanks. And what they imagine is always more powerful than what you could say. That is the strategy of restraint. In a world full of overexposure, mystery is currency, and restraint is the vault that protects it. Think of every powerful figure you admire. Now ask yourself, do they share everything? Do they explain themselves? Do they try to be liked? Number. They don't post their every emotion. They don't broadcast their thoughts. They don't explain their silence. They control their image, not by adding to it, but by subtracting from it. This is what most people miss. They think power is built by showing how much they know. But Machiavelli taught us the truth. It is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Now let's update that for today. It is much safer to be respected than understood. Because the more someone understands you, the easier you are to manipulate. Let me be clear. Restraint is not avoidance. It is not weakness. It is not fear. Restraint is discipline. It's the conscious decision to stay quiet, not because you don't know what to say, but because you do. There are 3 forms of restraint every powerful person masters. 1. Verbal restraint. This is the one you feel immediately. It's the pause before you respond. The choice to not correct someone's misunderstanding. The strength to let someone underestimate you and say nothing. Machiavelli would smile at this tactic. Because the man who talks less gets listened to more, and the man who holds back builds tension. Tension is power, and silence is the most underrated form of communication. 2. Emotional restraint. This one's harder. It's the ability to keep a neutral face when you're insulted, to not react when you're challenged, to delay gratification, to delay revenge. The one who controls their emotions controls their fate. Because in politics and in life, the one who overreacts first loses. Machiavelli said, "The prince must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. But to be either, you must first master your emotions." 3. Social restraint. This is the final level. It's knowing when not to share, when not to tell your friends your next move, when not to let the world into your personal life, when not to join the drama. You'll feel tempted to post, to explain, to clarify, resist it, because once you reveal your thinking, you give up leverage. And in a game of power, leverage is everything. Now let's look at the modern mistake: oversharing. We think it's vulnerability. We think it's strength. But more often, it's just emotional leakage. It's insecurity trying to dress itself up as authenticity. We post our feelings. We tweet our regrets. We turn our private lives into public content. But what does that create? Temporary validation and permanent exposure. Machiavelli would laugh at us because we're giving away our strongest cards for likes. You want to build power? Here's a rule. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them guess what you'll do. The unknown terrifies people. It forces respect, because when they can't pin you down, they can't control you. Now listen carefully. There's a scene in every powerful man's story where he sits quietly while everyone else scrambles to speak. In that silence, the entire room bends toward him. They lean in. They adjust themselves to his energy. Why? Because silence dominates. Not aggressively, not loudly, but fully. It makes you feel present, focused, unshakable. Try it. The next time you're in a room, say less. Speak slower. Pause longer. The next time you're in a room, say less. Speak slower. Pause longer. Watch how they respond. They'll try to fill the silence, and in doing so, they give you the information you need. Here's the paradox. When you say less, people think you know more. When you speak slowly, people think you're more intelligent. When you don't explain yourself, people assume you're more confident. It's not magic, it's psychology. Machiavelli didn't just study kings, he studied people, their reactions, their patterns, their fears, and he discovered a universal law. People respect what they don't fully understand, and fear what they can't predict. So here's your challenge. In the next conversation you have, say 30% less than you want to. Pause twice as long before speaking. Don't interrupt. Don't explain. Don't correct. Just observe. And watch what happens. People will start revealing themselves. They'll try to fill the void. They'll guess at your thoughts. They'll adjust themselves around your silence. That is power, not because you forced it, but because you earned it by practicing restraint. Machiavelli knew this. True influence is invisible, and the strongest move is often no move at all. In the next part, we dive deeper into the battlefield of perception, because silence is powerful, but what you allow people to see is even more important. We'll explore how to shape your image, not with noise, but with precision, the art of perceived power. You've learned to be quiet. Now you'll learn how to be feared. This is where we stop hiding and start mastering appearances. You don't need to raise your voice to be feared. You don't need to threaten or flex or explode, because the most terrifying man in the room says nothing. He doesn't need to. His presence says enough. You've been told that fear comes from dominance, from being bigger, louder, stronger. That's not true. Real fear doesn't come from violence. It comes from uncertainty, from tension, from the feeling that someone sees more than they show, knows more than they say, and could strike at any moment. It's not the punch that scares you. It's the silence before it. It's not the man who yells. It's the man who stares back and doesn't flinch. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He wrote, "It is not necessary for a prince to have all the good qualities, but it is necessary to appear to have them." But the same applies in reverse. You don't need to be dangerous. You only need to appear capable of danger. That's enough. Let's talk about the difference between real power and perceived power. Real power is what you can do. Perceived power is what others think you can do. And in many situations, perceived power matters more. Why? Because people don't react to facts. They react to their imagination. You don't need to attack someone to make them submit. You just need them to believe you're capable of attacking and willing to. That belief becomes fear, and fear becomes leverage. Picture this. You're in a meeting, a room full of talkers. Everyone's pitching, arguing, trying to prove their point. Except for one guy. He's quiet, calm, observing. He hasn't said a word. He's just listening. But something about him shifts the room. People glance at him before they speak. They second-guess themselves. They lower their voice. Why? Because his silence has created a power vacuum, and people feel it. They don't know what he's thinking. They don't know what he wants. They don't know what he'll do. And that not knowing makes him the most powerful person in the room. Machiavelli would have called him the real prince, the one who governs without being seen. Let's get tactical. Here are 5 tools to be feared without ever raising your voice. 1. Unpredictability. Predictability is safe. Predictability is weak. But when people don't know what you'll do next, they treat you carefully. Say no when they expect yes. Disagree when they expect silence. Leave when they expect you to stay. This keeps them guessing. And guess what? When they're guessing, they're off balance. That's power. 2. Stillness. Stillness is unsettling. In a world of fidgeting, tapping, pacing, and rambling, the man who's still stands out. Don't flinch. Don't blink too much. Don't rush. Stillness communicates control. And the man in control is the man they fear most. 3. Minimal words. Say only what's necessary. Use short, sharp sentences. Make your pauses longer. Let silence do the talking. When you speak less, people listen more. And when people hang on your words, you no longer need to raise your voice to be heard. 4. Steady eye contact. Not aggressive, not staring them down, just steady, unshaken, patient. It signals, I see through you, and I'm not afraid of what I see. That makes people deeply uncomfortable, because most people use words to hide. When you look past those words, you expose them, and exposure breeds submission. 5. Boundaries without explanation. Set limits, enforce them. Don't explain them. The person who feels the need to explain every decision invites negotiation. But the person who says, "This is how it is," and stops there, signals strength. They may not like it, but they'll respect it. And if they fear it, they'll never test it again. Machiavelli spoke of rulers who ruled without appearing to, men who pulled strings from the shadows. They had no need to show off, because by the time you saw their hand, you were already in their trap. This is the archetype you must master. You don't need to be everywhere. You just need to be felt everywhere. Be the man whose name comes up when you're not in the room. The one they can't read, the one they can't predict, the one they hesitate to cross. You don't get that through noise. You get it through precision, through silence, through posture, through calm, unshakable presence. Let's go deeper. Why does this work? Because people are more afraid of possibility than certainty. If they know exactly how you'll react, they feel safe. But if they don't know, their mind starts racing. What would he do if I cross him? Why isn't he saying anything? What does he know that I don't? This is how uncertainty creates pressure, and pressure creates compliance, and pressure creates compliance. It makes people play by your rules without you having to speak them. That's not intimidation. That's influence. Machiavelli would call it a soft tyranny, power without overt control. Now let's clarify something. You don't want to be feared because you're cruel. You want to be feared because you're disciplined, because you're not reactionary, because you don't need attention, because you act with intention. And that kind of fear becomes respect over time, because the loud man burns out. But the silent man, the one who speaks carefully, moves precisely, and controls his world, that man becomes a legend. Here's your exercise. Next time you're in a room, speak last. Hold your posture. Make your movements slow and deliberate. Keep eye contact when necessary. And say less. Refuse to explain your boundaries. Decline an invitation without reason. Say no. And don't fill the silence. Watch what happens. They'll call you cold. They'll call you mysterious. They'll even feel uncomfortable. Good. Let them. That means it's working. Machiavelli taught us, men must either be pampered or destroyed. They will revenge themselves for small injuries, but not for serious ones. What does that mean? It means you don't give half threats. You don't play halfway. You don't make noise. You move in silence. And when you move, it's final. That's how you become feared, without ever needing to raise your voice. Next, we go even further. We'll explore how showing too much success creates enemies, and why flaunting your power can actually destroy it. You've learned how to control presence. Now you'll learn how to avoid the trap of visibility, because power gained is nothing if you don't know how to protect it. Let's build the fortress. Power is magnetic, but it's also dangerous. The moment you show it off, you invite someone to challenge it. The moment you flaunt your success, you become a target. You think you're inspiring admiration. You're triggering resentment. And that's the paradox Machiavelli understood better than anyone. The moment you appear too strong, too successful, too perfect, you make enemies without even realizing it. Let's be clear. People don't hate you for being powerful. They hate you for reminding them that they're not. They don't resent your car. They resent the reflection of their own failure in your windshield. They don't envy your money. They envy the fact that you don't have to ask for permission. Success, when it's visible, triggers two reactions. The weak admire it. The strong plot against it. So if your power is real, keep it quiet. That's not humility, that's strategy. Every time you show off, your wealth, your wins, your influence, your relationships, you think you're building status. But what you're really doing is building insecurity in others, and insecurity breeds two things: jealousy, sabotage. Machiavelli warned about this in The Prince. A wise ruler must always seek to avoid being hated. Why? Because hatred poisons loyalty, and it poisons it quietly. The people smiling at your party, they're the same ones who'll light the match under your empire. Why? because you made them feel small, even if you didn't mean to, because your success was too loud. There was a ruler once, beloved by the public, feared by the nobles. But over time, he couldn't help himself. He started showing off. Gold-plated everything. Feasts twice a day. Statues built in his honor, while the people starved. At first, they praised him, but envy grows in silence. And one day, his trusted guards opened the back gates, the same guards who once bowed at his feet. Why? Because they were never loyal to him. They were loyal to the image of him they once respected, the one who led with restraint, not arrogance. Here's the rule. Real power hides. Displayed power decays. You don't want to be the face of your empire. You want to be the shadow that moves it. Don't put your name on every project. Don't broadcast every win. Stay low. Be the one who funds the building, not the one with his name on the top. Why? Because when power is visible, it becomes contestable. They see it, they measure it, and they begin to ask, what if I take it? But when your power is invisible, they can't fight what they can't find. There's a powerful tactic Machiavellians use, and it sounds strange. Appear less than you are. Let others underestimate you. Let them think you're still building. Let them believe you haven't figured it all out yet. Because the moment they think you've arrived, they'll start plotting your downfall. But if you're still on the way, they'll cheer you on. Why? Because they don't feel threatened. They'll say, he's doing well, but he's still one of us. Good. Let them think that. You don't need to correct them. You don't need to update anyone. The people who truly matter already know. Understand this. Every time you step into the spotlight, you give people a weapon, because now they know what to attack. They know your style, your preferences, your weaknesses, and worst of all, they know where to aim their envy. Machiavelli said, "There is no safe way to display greatness in a republic." That applies to life, because the mob doesn't reward success. The mob feeds on it. They don't want to learn from you. They want to be you or break you, whichever is easier. And today, this is more dangerous than ever, because the entire world has become a stage. Social media is a trap disguised as a throne. You post your new car, your vacation, your deal, and for a moment it feels good. But what you don't see is the resentment behind the likes, the envy behind the applause, the betrayal growing behind the scenes. Every post is a new enemy, not because you did anything wrong, but because you made someone feel insufficient, and they won't forgive you for that. So what's the solution? Don't disappear. Just reposition. Show your discipline, your principles, your restraint. Hide your wealth, your leverage, your connections, your true capabilities. Let people see your limits, not your reach. Let them believe you're sharp, but not lethal. Let them see the map, but not the destination. This keeps you protected, because you're not inviting competition, you're inviting respect. Let's talk psychology. Why do people feel the need to flaunt? Because they're still insecure, because they still think validation equals power. But true Machiavellians know validation is the currency of the weak. The powerful man doesn't need applause. He doesn't need to go viral. He doesn't need to post receipts. He moves in silence because he knows who he is. And that self-certainty, that stillness, that invisibility, that's what makes him untouchable. Here's your task. For the next 7 days, remove all signs of flaunting. No success posts, no subtle brags, no name dropping, no explaining how busy or in demand you are. Instead, let your silence speak. Let others wonder how you're doing. Let mystery replace marketing. Watch how your presence becomes heavier. Watch how people lean in. Because when they don't know your next move, they assume it's bigger than they can handle. Machiavelli understood something most people never will. The most powerful man in the kingdom is the one no one talks about, but everyone fears disappointing. He doesn't need the spotlight. He doesn't need the crowd. He doesn't need to be seen, because his power is rooted, not broadcasted. That's the path. That's how you build an empire no one can steal, not by being loud, but by being unreachable. Next, we're going to weaponize reputation. How to build a name so strong it walks into rooms before you do. You've mastered how to move. Now it's time to master what follows you. Let's sharpen your legend. Some men fight for power with weapons. Others fight with words. But the most powerful man doesn't fight at all. He walks into a room, and the room bends around him. Why? Because his reputation arrived before he did. In this part, we explore the silent force that outlives strength, outranks words, and overrules presence. Reputation. Not popularity, not fame, but reputation. The sum of what people believe about you when you're not around. Machiavelli understood its weight. It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. Your reputation, once built, can move armies without lifting a finger. But if built carelessly, it will destroy you faster than your worst enemy ever could. Let's start with a brutal truth. People don't treat you based on who you are. They treat you based on what they expect from you. And those expectations? They're shaped by your reputation. If they expect discipline, they'll respect your time. If they expect strength, they won't test your limits. If they expect weakness, they'll exploit you. You don't control how they act, but you can control what they expect. And that changes everything. There's a difference between reputation and image. Image is what you try to present. Reputation is what others say when you're not in the room. Anyone can build an image, polish the resume, dress sharp, say the right things. But reputation? That's built on consistency, on actions, not aesthetics, on rumors that survive without you speaking. And here's the Machiavellian twist. The less you say, the more your reputation says for you. When your name carries weight, you don't have to argue. You don't have to explain. You don't have to prove. The room already knows. There was a man in Florence, quiet but feared. He rarely spoke, never boasted. He wasn't rich, but he was powerful. Why? Because of his track record. Every deal he made was airtight. Every enemy that crossed him disappeared quietly. No one could prove anything, but everyone had heard something. He never had to raise his voice. People avoided crossing him, not because he threatened, but because he didn't need to. That is reputation. When your past actions speak louder than your present words, you don't need to perform. You just walk in, and the room adjusts. Let's be clear. Reputation isn't built on noise, it's built on patterns. Here's what creates it. Predictable strength. You say what you'll do. You do it without delay. No drama, just precision. Rare silence. You don't speak unless it's necessary. When you speak, it means something. Discipline in private. You don't broadcast your grind. But people notice your results and wonder how. Handling conflict with control. No emotional outbursts, just pressure applied where it hurts. A memory for betrayal. Forgive? Maybe. Forget? Never. And they know it. You don't need to post these things, you live them. And soon, people start to whisper, "Don't mess with him. He doesn't play games. If he says it, it's done." Good. That's the reputation doing the heavy lifting. Reputation isn't just a shield, it's a sword. When used right, it creates obedience without explanation, opportunities without asking, protection without negotiation. In business, people don't hire the best man. They hire the man whose name they trust. In war, armies didn't surrender to the strongest general. They surrendered to the one with the most legendary history. In power games, people don't fear what they see. They fear what they've heard. So ask yourself, what is your name whispering in rooms you're not in? If it's silent, you've built nothing. If it's weak, you've built wrong. If it's respected, you never need to raise your voice again. Now here's the trap. Once you start gaining power, you'll be tempted to promote yourself, to announce your wins, to explain your value, to advertise your mindset. Resist, because the loud man chases attention, but the powerful man attracts curiosity. When your reputation is strong, people will come to you, not because you demanded it, but because they've heard what happens when they don't. In Machiavelli's world and yours, the fastest way to kill your reputation is to break your word. If you say you'll do something and you don't, it's over. The cracks start, the doubts form, and soon the room no longer adjusts when you enter. Your name becomes empty. So use your word like a blade. Sharpen it with discipline. Use it rarely, and strike only when necessary. Speak less. Do more. Let others talk, and let your name answer for you. Here's a simple test. Think of 3 words people associate with you. If those words are unfocused, emotional, talkative, inconsistent, then your reputation is leaking power. But if the words are controlled, efficient, dangerous, respected, then you're on the right path. Now, reinforce them. Every decision, every message, every silence should echo those traits. And over time, you become a symbol, not just a man. Let people fill in the blanks. You don't need to explain every choice. You don't need to post your goals. You don't need to clarify your wins. Why? Because when they don't know the full story, they overestimate it. And overestimation creates power. Reputation is built faster by rumors than by resumes. So leave trails, but not explanations. Hints, but not answers. Let your work create myths. Let your name become legend. Machiavelli said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Today we'd translate that as, it is better to be respected for your name than adored for your posts. Be the man whose silence is louder than another's speech, whose absence is more powerful than another's presence, whose name does the talking, so you don't have to. That is power. That is leverage. That is freedom. Next, we close the circle. You'll learn how to become untouchable, not by dominance, but by disappearance, by knowing when to vanish and why the strongest men rarely stay visible. This final lesson is the one most men never learn, until it's too late. So if you're ready for the final step, the ghost strategy awaits. There comes a moment when the strongest thing you can do is leave, not out of fear, not to retreat, but to remind the world, you don't need it. In this final part, we explore the last move of a powerful man. Disappearance. Not running away, but vanishing. Intentionally, strategically, silently. Because when they can't find you, they can't control you. And when they realize they never had you to begin with, that's when you become untouchable. Let's define real power. Not money, not fame, not control over others, but the ability to say one word and mean it. Enough. To walk out, to disconnect, to disappear on your own terms. When you master this, you stop being reactive. You stop chasing validation. You stop being a servant to anyone's opinion. Machiavelli would call this the most dangerous kind of power: indifference, the kind that makes rulers nervous, the kind that turns threats into silence. Disappearing works because it flips the power dynamic. When you're always available, you become ordinary. When you're rare, you become valuable. When you're gone, you become mythical. People don't remember the man who never left. They remember the one who left at his peak. Look at history. The generals who retired undefeated, the leaders who vanished mysteriously, the thinkers who went silent after their masterpiece. Their power didn't die, it multiplied. Because humans don't worship presence, they worship absence with a legend. In Renaissance Italy, there was a man known only by whispers. He never appeared in court, he never gave interviews, no portraits, no records. But kings listened to him. He advised from a distance, sent letters with no signature, made decisions no one could trace back to him. And yet, his influence shaped entire wars. Why? Because he was everywhere and nowhere. That's power. When they don't even know where to aim, they can't shoot. Disappearing plays on a deep fear in the human brain. Uncertainty. When you're quiet, people get nervous. When you go silent, they wonder. When you vanish, they panic. They fill in the gaps. They assume you're planning something. They replay everything they said to you, looking for mistakes. You didn't threaten them. You simply left. And your absence became more powerful than your presence ever was. Let's be clear. This isn't about ghosting out of insecurity. It's not escapism. This is strategic invisibility. When you disappear, you aren't hiding. You're recharging. You're observing the game from outside the board. The lion doesn't roar every day. He vanishes into the grass until it's time to hunt. Same for you. When the noise gets loud, you go silent, not out of fear, out of dominance. Today's world runs on attention. Everyone is posting, everyone is talking, everyone is trying to be seen, which means the man who vanishes becomes the one thing they can't ignore. Silence is no longer neutral. It's a statement. It says, I don't need this. I'm not part of this game. You can't reach me because I'm not trying to be found. And suddenly, everyone wants to know where you went. Here's how to disappear tactically. Pull back gradually. Stop giving instant replies. Show up less. Say less. Create separation. Change routines. Decline invitations. Let absence create intrigue. Leave something unfinished, a conversation, a project, a statement. People obsess over things left unsaid. Return only when needed. And when you do, you bring impact, not presence. Disappear again. Because once is a move. But twice, that's a pattern. And patterns build legends. You don't need to be everywhere. In fact, the more you're seen, the more they expect you. The more they expect you, the less they value you. But when you limit access, your words hit harder. Your time feels sacred. Your presence becomes rare. Just like art, power comes from rarity. The man who's everywhere is forgettable. The man who vanishes becomes immortal. Ask yourself, do you need them to notice you, or do you choose when you are seen? That is the difference between desperation and strategy, between noise and impact. The man who disappears isn't avoiding life. He's mastering control, his control over himself and the attention of everyone else. In one of his final letters, Machiavelli wrote not to kings, but to himself. He said, I withdraw into myself. In silence, I become more aware of power than I ever did in noise. He knew that when you vanish, you don't lose power. You become the source of it. There's one last tactic that seals your legacy. Leave before they're ready. Not after the fall, Not when you're tired, but right after your biggest win. That's when your image freezes in their mind, forever undefeated. That's how legends are made, and that's how you become untouchable. The world rewards the loud, but it obeys the silent. You now understand why showing off is weakness, why power is subtle, and why the most dangerous man is the one you never see coming. You've learned the laws, the tactics, the mindset. Now, say less, move quietly, and when they look for you, let them find only a shadow.